If he had a decor style, it would probably be red flag because they were just all over the place. Hello, I am Jeanette and this is my channel, Karma Rising. I talk about true crime cases and give my opinions on those cases, and I can be pretty opinionated sometimes, so buckle up. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe if you are a fan of true crime, mystery, murders, mayhem, and all that jazz. I'll be posting weekly and taking suggestions for other cases to cover in the comments below. Today, I'm going to be talking about the kidnapping of Jaycee Lee Dugard. On June 10th, 1991, beautiful 11-year-old Jaycee Lee Dugard was abducted in broad daylight while walking to the bus stop near her home in Myers, California. This case was unsolved and Jaycee was a missing child for 18 years. Until one day in August 2009, boom, she reappears with a convicted sex offender. And she's not by herself. Oh no. She's got 2 teenage daughters in tow. There were several people who could have intervened to help Jaycee while she was missing and helped her escape, and they just didn't. Which when you hear, you're going to be like, seriously though? It's ridiculous. I'm going to name the 3 worst offenders on that list. So before I get into all that and my opinions, let me give you the chronological timeline of events. So who is Jaycee Dugard? Jaycee Lee Dugard was born on May 3rd, 1980 in Arcadia, California. Her mother, Terry Probyn, raised her as a single mother, and her bio father wasn't in the picture at all. Her mother ends up marrying this guy, her stepfather, Carl Probyn, who Jaycee wasn't super fond of. Then in 1990, her sister Shayna is born. Jaycee was super close with her mother and her little sister. At this point, they had all moved to a small rural community called Myers near Lake Tahoe in California. It was seen as a safer place to raise a family than the city of Arcadia, which has a pretty high crime rate. On the day of her abduction, Jaycee had been preparing for a field trip with her 5th grade class, and her biggest concern was asking her mother if she could shave her legs for the trip, so she wouldn't be embarrassed, you know. Jaycee was wearing her favorite outfit and headed towards the bus stop. Halfway up the hill, this guy stops his car next to her, which is weird, but Jaycee, being an innocent girl, thinks he's asking for directions or something. That is not the case. As he rolls his window down, he shocks her with a stun gun unconscious. The last thing Jaycee remembers before waking up in the clutches of this man is reaching out and touching a pine cone. Terrifying. At this point, Jaycee is driven 150 miles southeast to Antioch, California, though she has no clue where they're taking her. There is a woman in the backseat who physically holds Jaycee down during the car ride. Jaycee's first thought is that this is a kidnapping for ransom. Like, obviously, we've all seen those movies as kids where the scary guy kidnaps the kid and then the parents have to pay a ransom. That's what makes the most sense. This poor little girl has no idea what is going to happen. This whole scene unravels in front of Jaycee's stepfather, Carl Probyn, who is watching her as she walks to the bus stop, as well as other children who were nearby. He chases this vehicle carrying his stepdaughter on his mountain bike, but couldn't catch them. He got a description that it was a mid-sized gray car with 2 people in it. In the car, they strip her naked, and the only thing she is able to keep is a tiny butterfly ring, which she keeps and hides from her abductors for the next 18 years. So who kidnapped Jaycee Lee Dugard? The man is Phillip Garrido, at the time a 39-year-old convicted sex offender. Phillip Garrido was convicted multiple times on sex abuse, kidnapping, and rape charges and released every time. He eventually served 9 years of what should have been a 50-year sentence for holding a woman hostage in a storage unit and sexually abusing her. Luckily, a vigilant police officer found the storage unit was unlocked and got curious and was able to rescue the woman. So while Phillip is in prison, he meets the woman who was seen in the car on the day Jaycee goes missing, Nancy. Nancy, she had been visiting her uncle in the prison and ended up meeting Phillip while she's there. That's always a great place to find love. She married him while he was still confined to Leavenworth Prison on October 5th, 1981. Phillip was released in January 1988 from prison to the care of his mother, who suffered from dementia. So that was probably a great idea. Nancy was 35 at the time of the abduction. So back in 1991, they arrive home with Jaycee. They cover her head with a blanket and they bring her into a series of sheds and storage units. They told her there were dogs guarding the door and that they would attack her if she left, which I don't think that was the case, but back in Myers, the Probyns immediately sound the alarm that Jaycee has been abducted. A search begins immediately, and the media attention on this case blows up. Like, it was huge. The town puts pink everywhere to keep her case alive because pink is her favorite color. Flyers are distributed everywhere. This was huge. They searched the areas around where she was abducted and the vast wilderness surrounding that area. They followed up on leads and searched the homes of local sex offenders. They could not turn up any trace of Jaycee. Her stepfather was even interrogated as a person of interest since he was the last person seen with her. There were other witnesses who saw the abduction, so that was pretty lucky for him. Her mother was devastated and spent the next 18 years raising awareness on child safety, missing children, and Jaycee's kidnapping. By all accounts, it seemed that the general consensus was that Jaycee probably hadn't survived long after the abduction. So back in Antioch, Jaycee Dugard undergoes some pretty horrendous things. Phillip Garrido, immediately, he started grooming her by bringing her milkshakes and candy, teddy bears, a journal. I'm not going to get into the details of what he did to her, but he sexually abused her pretty horribly and pretty regularly. Jaycee wrote a couple books describing in detail her ordeal, and I will link those below. She was kept handcuffed and naked in the outbuildings in the beginning, and her only food was the fast food milkshakes that Phillip would bring her. She had a bucket that she used as a toilet. Eventually, Jaycee is moved inside a small, bolted, soundproofed room in the home. He had given her a small children's television to watch, but she didn't have any news channels, so she had no idea that they were even looking for her. He would force her to go on methamphetamine binges with him that he called runs, and he would dress her up like an adult woman with makeup, dresses, heels, like the whole nine. Just weird. So during these runs, Phillip Garrido would actually apologize to her for kidnapping her and show guilt for what he'd done, but does not show any signs of planning to release her. He also had some pretty serious delusions of grandeur. So he would make Jaycee listen for voices that he claimed came from the walls. He believed he was a prophet of God and was getting messages from God. So about 7 months later, she officially met Nancy, who also brought her gifts and apologized that Jaycee was in this position, which, no thank you, don't apologize. So at one point, Phillip Garrido ends up going to jail and because he violates his parole, and Nancy is the one who is in charge of making sure that Jaycee is still kept prisoner. So they just had a really weird relationship. Nancy would be really nice, and then some days she would blame Jaycee for the kidnapping and get really jealous and act really cold and cruel. Weird. So on 2 occasions, they gave Jaycee kittens to share her time with, but those kittens both mysteriously went missing. And Jaycee even had a journal about the kittens, and she wrote her name at the end of one entry. And Phillip Garrido tore this page up. And this was the last time until captivity that she would ever say her name, write her name, anything. So Garrido was already a registered sex offender, and during the time Jaycee was with him, he was visited over 60 times by parole officers. And they would come check 2 or 3 times a year and interview Garrido and check the whole house. There's videos of this. They never once looked hard enough to find Jaycee. So she undergoes this trauma for 2 years, getting raped day in and day out. And one day they cook her a meal, which had never happened before. And that's when they tell her they think that she is pregnant. Can you imagine? Ew. Garrido, his wife, and Jaycee read books, watch programs on TV shows about childbirthing to get ready for their baby. Her first daughter is born August 18th, 1994, and then her second daughter is born November 13th, 1997. She took care of her daughters the best way she could, teaching them using information from television and her 5th grade education. She says that she knew she needed to protect them from Garrido's rages and rants, but she didn't really know how she was going to do it. Somehow she did. So the whole time they're growing up, the girls are told Jaycee is their older sister and Nancy is their mother, though Nancy would be cruel to them as well. A neighbor who was a child at the time notes that he saw a girl in the yard who identified herself as Jaycee, and then Garrido caught them talking and called her inside. And soon after that, he built an 8-foot fence, and then Jaycee was allowed to go in the yard after that because obviously, like, she was getting curious. And at no point was anybody like, why is he building this huge fence? I don't know. So eventually Jaycee and the girls outgrow the small room and they move permanently into the backyard. It's like a secondary yard with sheds and outbuildings. And basically he had split his yard into 2 yards with a fence, and the back part of the yard you could only access via a tarp covering the entrance. And then behind that tarp was where they lived. So Garrido also kept a blog called God's Desire Church, where he made more outrageous claims that he could control sound, like whatever that means. Anyway, he made pamphlets and wrote essays about his weird religious beliefs and would distribute them in public places. And at some point after the girls are born, Phillip Garrido opens a print shop, and Jaycee works there. Customers and other employees knew Jaycee, and they had no idea this was Jaycee Lee Dugard. She called herself Alyssa, and she was a graphic artist at the business, but she never made any attempt to notify anybody or escape. Like, everybody saw her in there, knew her as Alyssa, and like, she would even answer the door at the house sometimes. So how was Jaycee Lee Dugard discovered? On August 24th, 2009, Garrido went to the San Francisco office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also known as the FBI, and left an essay suggesting that he had discovered a problem to solve behaviors like sexual predation. So then he rolls into the University of California police office with his two daughters, like, no big deal. And he wants to hold an event on the campus. So he speaks with the special events manager, and she finds it weird that these 2 girls are there. Like, they seem like they've been forced to come with him and they don't want to be there. So she thinks this is weird. She asks him to come back the next day and just find out more about the event. So the 2 officers who were there decide to run a background check in the meantime and find out, oh no, he's a registered sex offender and probably shouldn't be around children. So this is not looking good. When Phillip Garrido and the girls go back the next day, she notes that they look pale and appear to be speaking strangely, like they were watching their words. So obviously this is all super suspicious, and Officer Allie Jacobs, who is a saint in my book, calls this in to his parole officer, who is she was eagle-eyed about potential abuse. So 2 parole agents drive to the Garrido home and find him there with his wife and his elderly mother, who at this point is deep into dementia. I doubt she had any idea that Jaycee was even there. They drive him back to the parole office and interview him there, where he claims the daughters are a relative and had been left in his care. So he also wasn't supposed to be traveling beyond 25 miles from his home, and the University of California campus is 40 miles away. So despite all of this, they let him go. Like, no big deal. Go right ahead. So they bring him home. He has to absolutely pinky promise to come back the next day and talk to them about all their concerns and bring the 2 daughters. So the next day is August 26th, 2009, and Garrido shows up at the parole office with his wife, Jaycee, who is calling herself Alyssa, and the 2 young girls. And Alyssa says that she is the mother of the 2 girls. So they take her aside and start questioning her alone, and she tells them that she knows that Garrido was a sex offender, but that he had turned a corner and he was not the same man. And so, as is usually done during investigations, they want more information about Alyssa. They want to know where she's from, her last name, more information about the girls. They just want to make sure everything's cool. Like, who are you? Give us some info. You can bounce. So Alyssa starts to get agitated and defensive, like saying she's an abused wife from Minnesota. She wants to know why she's being interrogated. And to the police, this is just all really strange. So they call, like, the police, like the real police. When the police sergeant arrives, she finally lets it all out that Garrido had kidnapped and raped her, and the 2 girls are her daughters, and like the whole horrible ordeal just was really bad. So she tells him her name, Jaycee Lee Dugard. Like, Everybody freaks out. This is just crazy. An 18-year-old unsolved missing persons case solved like that. So Jaycee calls her mom and just says, "Mama, come quick." Can you imagine getting that call? Like, yes, I'll be there in like 3 seconds. Okay. So what happened to Jaycee Dugard? Jaycee is now home with her mom, sister, and daughters. She has been doing animal therapy and published her book, A Stolen Life, a Memoir, in July 2011. So Jaycee's aunt, Tina Dugard, commented that Jaycee's kids looked healthy and, quote, appear and behave like normal kids. So that's good. Terry Probyn, Jaycee's stepfather, noted that Jaycee had developed a significant bond with Phillip Garrido, and the two daughters loved him like a father. They were all upset when they found out he was arrested. Some people have mentioned that she could have been a sufferer of Stockholm Syndrome. So, did Jaycee Lee Dugard have Stockholm Syndrome? I don't know for sure. If you are unaware, Stockholm Syndrome is a condition in which hostages develop a psychological bond with their captors during captivity. Emotional bonds can form between captors and captives during intimate time together, and these are generally considered irrational because of the danger or risk endured by the victims. But what ends up happening is that the captive ends up staying with their captor willingly and even helping them with their cause. Given the opportunity to escape, they just don't. Jaycee insists that she did not suffer from this, but that is a common response of sufferers. So the police investigated Phillip Garrido in relation to other kidnapping crimes. He had an enormous stash of VHS tapes that appeared to all be evidence, but had to be sifted through. Like, they had to go through it. So they asked Jaycee to go through the footage with them to verify the evidence and look for any other victims. In the tape after tape after tape after tape, it is all Jaycee. Just every video. He just recorded every single methamphetamine run that they had done for years. They did not see any other victims on that tape. So Phillip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years to life in prison, and Nancy Garrido was sentenced to 36 years to life in prison, and they are both eligible for parole in August 2034, but will likely never be released. So this case is already like miraculous and horrifying and shocking all at the same time. But what makes it worse is that there were several opportunities for law enforcement to get in there and get her out or prevent this in the first place, and they just didn't. So Jaycee even commented that she felt like nobody even cared that she was there, and she made herself present time and time again. Even before the abduction, Phillip Garrido was known to be a sexual predator, and there were chances for him to be stopped. His original crimes were so disgusting and egregious. If I had been telling you that the story, you probably would also be saying, like, obviously he should never leave jail. So the first person that failed Jaycee Dugard is actually a group of people, the Leavenworth Prison Parole Board. This man should never have been released in the first place. His original crime he went to prison for was not the only crime he has been charged with either, but it was just so horrible. They could have certainly surmised that someone so sick as to have someone chained in a storage unit might be at high risk to reoffend. The second person that failed Jaycee Lee Dugard is actually several unnamed individuals. The parole officers monitoring Phillip Garrido's home. No identity was ever released, and I believe this is obviously to keep them safe. If he had a decor style, it would probably be red flag because they were just all over the place. First of all, he built a fence and split his yard in half, and nobody even noticed or was like, "Hey buddy, what you doing there? So you're storing a bunch of sketchy shit back there." He was able to completely hide a compound in the middle of a city. Like, Antioch is not some rinky-dink one-light town. This is a city, and he had sheds and soundproof buildings that nobody even knew about. That blows my mind. Then he puts an 8-foot wall around the property to essentially keep people out. And they're still like, yeah, that's cool. You can do that. Like, for sure. The California Office of Inspector General released a report that has all of this information that I will link below. Basically, they claimed that the reason they never did more to investigate was because he was accidentally listed as a low-level offender. You'd think that that list is the one that they'd be checking twice. In that same report released by the Inspector General, there is an instance detailed in which a parole agent encountered a 12-year-old girl in the home, but claimed she was his brother's daughter, so They even called his brother to see if he had kids, and they verified he didn't, and the parole officers must have just been like, yeah, whatever, I'll follow up on that next week, and just never did. So there's that. And then during a portion of the time Jaycee was held, Phillip Garrido was on house arrest, and he had an ankle monitor. The monitor shows that he was accessing an area behind the home that was not known to be part of his property. This is the secret compound where the girls were being kept. So not only were the parole officers oblivious to the fact that there was essentially 3 hostages at Phillip Garrido's house, but apparently they didn't communicate with the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department at all. And you guessed it. The Contra Costa Sheriff's Department is the 3rd group of people who failed to help Jaycee Dugard. All right, so there was a call made to 911 regarding a child hurting themselves in a pool in the Garrido's backyard. This information was never relayed to the parole officer. Another missed opportunity to find these girls. Jaycee had said it felt like nobody cared that she was there, and it is starting to seem like that is maybe the case. The worst missed opportunity to find Jaycee was definitely an incident in 2006. One of Phillip Garrido's neighbors called 911 to report children living in the backyard and claimed that Garrido was psychotic with sexual addictions. A deputy sheriff went to the home and spoke with Garrido for 30 minutes at the door and left after telling him it was illegal for people to be living outside on his property. They literally didn't even go speak with the neighbor or investigate the backyard at all. They just took his word for it. No big deal. It was just a lot of incompetence all around. And it just seems like no one really wanted to follow through and do their jobs. And unfortunately, the collateral damage for that was the innocent young girl. And then the 2 daughters that she brought into the world fathered by just this maniac. So those are the top 3 people or groups of people who failed to help Jaycee Lee Dugard before she even suffered this tragedy and then while she was in captivity. This is just an all-around sad case. I would be curious to hear your opinions on this case and if you think Jaycee actually was suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, so please let me know in the comment section below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions for cases you'd like to see me cover in the future, please comment that down below as well. I will see you all next week.